What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. We did running backs. I'll link that in the description box down below. On to wide receivers now, going through the tiers. And I didn't mention in the last video, this is for redraft, not for dynasty. But realistically, if you like a person a lot in redraft, you think you're going to produce early in a redraft league, let's be honest, you're going to like them in dynasty. So we're going to start things off. JSN, number one, only player in the top tier. It's basically kind of the same thing as with running backs. You've got Bijan at the top. I think you have JSN at the top. We'll talk about this next year. I think some people actually don't have JSN as the number one wide receiver. I don't really see how that's the case, but definitely top tier in this class in my eyes. I think the biggest thing is you can poke holes in literally every single one of the rest of the wide receivers. There are issues with. This is not as strong of a class as in prior years. Definitely not as strong as last season. Had a really good class last year. There are problems with everyone. You could argue that the problem with JSN is that there are some NFL teams, we've confirmed this, do view him as only a slot wide receiver. The thing I always go back to is, okay, well, those teams won't be drafting him, right? Like if a team actually thinks that he can only play in the slot, they will not draft him because he's going to go in the mid first round. That's generally where mock drafts kind of have him at right now. So who cares? Who cares what those teams think? They're not going to get him. I don't think he's a slot only receiver. I think you can play him on the outside as well. He'll be a week one fantasy starter. I mean, he's not going to be a wide receiver one. It's going to depend on, exactly what team gets him. But you're going to be able to start JSN in your fantasy lineup, no matter the scoring format, in week one. He's going to be that good. He's just a rock solid prospect. Move on to tier two. Headlining tier two, and I would say tier two is like very fluid. Very dependent on where they go in the draft, what teams they land on. I don't have like a super strong take on exactly how you want to take this tier. So if you want to kind of mix up this tier a little bit, you can definitely do that. We're going to start off with, if I can find the name on the bottom here. Well, we're going to start with Addison. There he is. There's Addison. It'll get easier once we start throwing some names up there. But Addison, knock on him is the same knock for a lot of wide receivers in this class is the weight. 173 pounds. That is very, very small. He's 5'11", so he's got a little bit of the size that some of these wide receivers also don't have. But yeah, elite production in college. Won the Blitnikoff Award in 2021, so not this past season, but the one before that, at just 19 years old. So very young, very productive in college. Has, I believe it was the ankle injury last season. Not like he missed the whole year or anything, but if you miss some games, you're not going to win that award, obviously. But yeah, the big issue is really just the weight. Also, he only ran a 4.4940, so it's not like, oh, he's 173 pounds, but he runs like a 4.2. It's like, that's not crazy fast. Like, it's a good time, but when you combine that with his size, it's 18th percentile, size adjusted speed, not fantastic. Also very, very bad against the press in college. And so there is absolutely a world where, team is trying to play him on the outside. He's not getting open as much. My model still has him as a really, really, really solid pick, though it's assuming he goes in the first round. So the model takes under the assumption, given his size, given his athletic profile, given his production in college, all that stuff, if he goes in the first round, it loves him. If he falls out of the first round, indicating teams are worried about the weight, it'll drop him, definitely. But right now, I think having him at 2 makes sense. After that, I have Zay Flowers. The total production for Flowers isn't fantastic, right? Because he was on a dreadful offense every single year in college. Like, the total numbers can only be so good if the entire team around you is terrible. Also has some weight concerns, 5'9", 182. So still bigger, like 10 pounds bigger than Addison, and also coming at, shorter, smaller frame. So he's a bigger guy. And I'm not too concerned about the weight for him. And honestly, you look at a lot of these receivers, like Addison, Downs, Mims, Hyatt, Dell, there's a lot of small receivers. I really just don't think with Zay Flowers, we can use that as a knock. People will use the production, but again, I don't think that's too much of a problem because how much can you really produce in that offense? He did everything for the offense in college. I think he's going to gain a lot of steam if he goes, relatively early in the draft. It's not a lock that he goes in the first round, but I think he can he can find his way into like the, 20 to 30 kind of range in the draft, maybe 25 to 30, sneak into that first round. I think he's going to gain a lot of steam for fantasy because he's not locked into anything. Like he can play on the inside, he can play on the outside, he can run a full route tree. He's just not limited in any way. Drops are an issue people point to. For me, so I weight that a lot for like running backs. If I look at a running back and I'm like, you got stone hands, you had 5 receptions in college, 1 reception per game, the odds you turn into a high-end pass catcher for a running back is slim to none. It's just not going to happen, especially with, so many teams going to like pass catching specialists, right? It's just not going to happen. If someone's a really good wide receiver and they just like drop the ball like 3% more of the time than other receivers, that is fixable. And especially if someone's going to draft someone high and you're going to be a first round pick, like you're telling me that you can't fix that. And then also like there are receivers in the NFL who have major drop concerns, but are still really good in fantasy because they're good wide receivers. They get enough volume. I think Matt Harmon compared him to Quentin Johnston from like, maybe not as good of a route runner, but just the fact that like he's a good route runner, a good player, small receiver, struggles with drops, but he's so good. It's like you just kind of take that, right? If you got 12 targets, hey, if he dropped 1 or 2 of them, it's okay. That's still a lot of catchable balls, and it's still good production fantasy. So I really like Flowers. My model comps him to Steve Smith as like the bull comp, so like the highest outcome. So great comps. I think he can produce early in his career. And then to round out this tier, it's Quentin Johnston, and he's definitely going to be a polarizing player. He's got the size that people are more looking for like a prototypical, first round wide receiver talent, 6'3", 208. So I guess maybe at 6'3", 208, it's like a little bit on the thinner. I don't call someone 208 pounds thin, right? But like on the smaller size for that height, but still a bigger guy, explosive home run hitter, can obviously play on the outside. I personally am of the camp that I don't think he's a number 1. I think his best role is to be on an explosive offense, to already have someone else, and whether that's, an outside receiver or just like someone that's really good in the slot, just like someone else, even like a fantastic tight end, just something like if you put him on Kansas City, right? And you already have Travis Kelce there. It's like, I think he's a good second option that doesn't need to be forced to be the guy because he's going to have an insane ceiling, even if he doesn't catch 7 or 8 receptions, right? Because he can get there on long plays. And it's not only running deep downfield. He's got this move where he'll run a curl, a comeback, something like that on the outside. And he's always like looking at the leverage of the receiver or the corner behind him. And he catches the ball, and you can find that literally type like, I don't know, Quentin Johnston highlights. You'll see it in like 2 seconds. I haven't even watched really like the YouTube videos of it. I promise you'll notice this. And he spins the other direction. He does this more than any other receiver in this class, or really the receiver that I've seen, is he always just catches the ball, immediately moves, and he's like always right. Just moves in the direction the defender isn't, and that's how he's busting off these long plays. So it's not like, I guess Hyatt is a receiver that like most of his balls are like deep downfield. That's where he was getting a lot of that production. Like Quentin Johnston did that, but a lot of his plays aren't super far downfield. They're kind of just on the outside, 10, 15 yards downfield, and he turns that into much more, which is obviously fantastic in fantasy. So I think he's got a high ceiling. I'm not convinced if the landing spot, forces him to be a number 1, that's who he is. And because we don't have the landing spot yet, I kind of put him here. B tier. Moving down a little bit, we're going to start off with Josh Downs. A lot of people really like him. Amazing production in college. If you just look at the production profile, first in max percent of team receiving yards, first in max yards per team pass attempt, 5th in touch share. Like he was really good. What's the problem? Well, it's the same one with most of these wide receivers. 5'9", 171 pounds. When I initially did the wide receiver comps model, which you can find on the website, under any package you have, you can find it. Basically, it looks athletically to wide receivers and gives you 10 different wide receivers. Historically, I think I've gone back maybe like, 15, 20 years, and it just kind of finds comps. So you can just like look at these players. If you don't really know who Josh Downs is, who are the comps of these players? And a lot of the wide receivers in this class comped to each other. And I was like, did I do something wrong in this? But it's really just because like there are so many smaller wide receivers in this draft class, and we have not even gotten to the smallest one that we talk about in a second. is also small. Like there's just so many in this class. So when we've got these bigger receivers like Quentin Johnston, that's kind of why he's going higher. But anyways, yeah, that's really the concern. And then the same thing with Addison. It was like, you know, he's 5'9", 171, 4.48 40. It's only a 12th percentile size adjusted speed score. That's not fantastic, but you know, a lot of people like him because it seemed like he played bigger. He played bigger than that size. Was perfectly fine getting off of press. So don't think that like, oh, corners in the NFL are going to press him and he can't get off. Like he was actually good at getting off press in college. Fantastic at coming down with contested catches. Just again, plays much bigger than his size. How early he goes will tell us a lot. He's one of the ones that the model is very, very, I don't think variance is the right word, but we'll use it now. It moves a lot with draft capital. If I were to shoot him in the first round, it's in love with him. If I'm going to drop him into the third round, it's not as much in love with him. Right now, it's based off like mid-second round. That's the projection right now where he's going. So we'll watch the draft capital with him because whenever we have a wide receiver that's got fantastic production and the underlying metrics are there, if they go earlier than we think, that's obviously a very, very good thing. After him in this tier, Marvin Mims, and he is going to be, I hope not everyone's sleeper, but a lot of people's sleeper this season. I think Scott Barrett has him like second or something crazy like that amongst his wide receivers. He's just really good, and it's very difficult to poke holes in his production. The biggest thing is really that like his touchdowns all came on like super long plays. He was very, very efficient. He didn't necessarily have like, you know, a Biletnikoff season. He didn't have like just jaw-dropping overall numbers, but he was highly efficient in college. He had probably the best high school career in Texas football history. Texas, obviously, a state that produces a ton of NFL talent. And so when you have the best high school career ever in that state, you know, that's a lot more than having the best high school career in like New Hampshire or Maine, right? That's a very, very good state to be the best in. So you have all that production, very efficient in college. Then he goes to the combine, and you know, some of these wide receivers really hurting themselves at the combine. 91st percentile speed score, or 94th percentile speed score, 91st percentile burst score. We look at him, similar size concerns as some of these other players, but like 5'11", 183, you know, bigger than Addison, bigger than Downs, bigger than Dell we're going to get to, so not a huge problem. My model comps him to John Brown, which I think I like a lot, but it's John Brown with even more burst, right? John Brown, obviously a very, very good deep threat. Like Mims has more burst than Brown. So I really like him. I'm expecting him to go in the third round, but with how much kind of like the analytics community likes him, if there's a team that really uses analytics, that really falls in love with him, and he can go in the second round in the draft or land on a really good team, I mean, I'm telling you, his ADP is going to be not super high. He's never going to go earlier than like JSN, Addison, Flowers, Quentin Johnston, and I don't think Josh Downs. I think this is probably the earliest ADP-wise he would go, but if the landing spot's awesome and the reports are good, which I think they're going to be, I mean, I think he's a really good receiver, I think he's going to be a lot of people's favorite sleeper pick. After him, Hyatt. Now, I could see Hyatt cratering here. I could not see Hyatt going up. I genuinely think this is the highest I could ever rate him because I really just think the production is like fake. Honestly, I think his production is fake. Obviously, he won the Biletnikoff Award last year, best wide receiver in college football, 6 foot, 176. It's just the offense that Tennessee runs. They run these like this stack formation, which you don't see. You see it a little bit, but you don't see it much in the NFL. And he's just running deep every single play. It's all he can do. He would be matched up one-on-one with the safety. He's getting a free release on every single play. And just with how their offense operated, you know, when you're one-on-one with the safety out of the slot, of course you're going to have good production. Like if no one else is coming at you until you get to the safety, yeah, you're going to be left wide open plenty of times. You're going to have one-on-one there and come down with a lot of them. Like, of course your production is going to be good. You don't have to be that good of a player. So I'm not convinced. I'm not saying he's going to be bad. It's just like, if I don't think he's that good, and then also he can basically only run deep, now you're relying on him landing on a team where the quarterback can actually do that. You're relying on him consistently doing that. Like, I guess in, best ball leagues, if you want to capture that upside, sure, but he's going to go earlier in best ball anyways to account for that. But in a redraft league, like, are you ever going to play him? It has to be in the flex, and he better have landed on a good team, and he better, actually be a good wide receiver, which I'm still not convinced of right now. So not a glowing review from him, but I'm very skeptical, and the model likes him. It's not in love with him, but it really likes him at an early second round ADP. And he is a player I think teams could look at and also think the production's a little bit fluky, a little bit fake. And if he falls at all, the model's going to tank him. And I kind of hope that happens. Honestly, it's weird. I hope it happens and I hope it don't. Because if it doesn't happen, he goes that early, we can just fade him. And I really think that's going to be the right move and people will take him early. If he tanks in the draft, no one's going to draft him. You don't really have an edge. But again, I could see him falling when I do this video again post-draft. C tier. I think the C tier is like, everyone has, a good chance of like breaking out. They can all be breakout wide receivers. But none of these receivers are expected to go early. So everyone we talked about here, I could easily see going in the top 2 rounds, many of them going in the first round. Probably all of them, honestly, going in the top 2 rounds, besides maybe Mims. Mims might drop beyond that. Everyone in this tier is not supposed to go that early, but there are things about them that I think they can be really good, have really good production fantasy. So we'll start off with Rashee Rice. I think it's Rashee, but I'll correct me with all of these names if I'm pronouncing them wrong. Good size, 6 foot, 204 pounds, decent enough speed, 4.5, 140 at that size. That's perfectly fine. Really good after the catch. I wrote in the rookie notes, so honestly, it's notes on every player. But for all the rookies, I've already written up like a full breakdown of them, and wrote down that he's not T.Y. Hilton. Like, he's not gonna catch the ball in the middle of the field and just like curl up in a ball, just like go down immediately. Like, you're gonna need multiple defenders to take down Rashee Rice. He's gonna fight for yards. He's gonna try his absolute best to get every single inch. Sometimes receivers get hurt doing that, and sometimes watch it in fantasy, like, just go down. You're not getting out of this. Like, please do not get injured. But it's nice having that mentality. And I think he's just a really good wide receiver. And if you needed to know the comp, my model comps him to Brandon Ayuk. So for those of you who've watched my videos for a while, I mean, it makes sense. And I'm going to like him if Brandon Ayuk is his #1 comp. But yeah, I just think he's like a really versatile wide receiver. You can kind of play him anywhere. Good size. There's not that many negatives besides, he's not going super early. And sometimes, when you look at this draft class, not being strong really anywhere, it's just not a good draft this year. If someone falls, you're like, well, why'd you fall? There's not even that many good players. But yeah, I think he's really good. Wouldn't be shocked if he went earlier than people expect. The next one, I genuinely don't know how to say his name. So please tell me how. I'm going to butcher it. I know it's Kayshon, obviously, but is it Boutte? I don't know how to say his last name. Someone tell me that one. Super polarizing. If Quentin Johnston was polarizing, this kid is going to be incredibly polarizing. Draft capital is probably going to solve some of that, because if he goes super early, it means the NFL is leaning towards he's going to be as good as he was post or pre-injury. If he falls, it's the combine numbers are real. We're very concerned. So for those of you who don't know, comes out LSU very strong at a very young age, which breakout age is overall overrated. It's worth noting when people produce at a very young age, definitely worth noting, but the actual number of breakout age doesn't hold a lot of predictive power. But it's worth noting, he was very, very productive in multiple seasons at a young age at a very good school. Like, LSU is not playing scrubs, right? They're a very good school, produce a lot of high-end wide receiver talent. Then he injured his ankle in 2021, was pretty trash, honestly, in 2022. He even talked about not fully trusting the ankle even the year after the injury. Goes to the combine and just tests horribly, like truly horrific combine numbers. And so the question is long-term he going to produce like he was at a very young age, at a very good school, and be really good in the NFL? Or is he just not going to get back to that point? Is he not going to trust the ankle? Was some of that small sample size? Because it's not like he had 1,500 receiving yards, 18. Like, he was really good. He didn't necessarily like set the world on fire or anything. I don't know the answer, and that's why I put him in this tier, because it's like, in a relatively weak class, if I see someone who there's a path there, there's absolutely a path to him being a really, really good wide receiver, this is where I put him. And so we'll watch draft capital. Right now, I'm assuming like late third, early fourth round. So any variance from there, and we'll kind of reevaluate where he goes. After him, we got Jayden Reed, another just really good all-around wide receiver, a little bit under 200 pounds, 191 pounds, 5'11". So again, kind of a similar mold to many of these receivers, maybe, a little bit bigger than some of the ones we talked about before. But he can play inside, he can play outside, he can get open against any sort of coverage, man, zone, can beat press coverage, just a very quality wide receiver. My model comps him to Stephon Diggs. Perfect Stephon Diggs, a wide receiver who didn't necessarily go very early in the draft, but when you looked at his profile, it was like, well, what's he bad at? It was really like nothing. And so whenever you get a Diggs comp for one of these like mid-round wide receivers, you want to kind of take notice of that. But yeah, just a really, really good sleeper pick, hoping it lands on a good offense. For everyone now, offense is going to be important. Like, I don't think he's good enough to go to a team with just horrendous quarterback play and like produce. Like, everyone on this list from like, C tier down really does need to land on a team that's got like at least a fine quarterback, one where like, okay, that's perfectly fine. But like, if Jayden Reed went to the Vikings, we're all in. I mean, that's going to be a phenomenal landing spot. Someone's going to go there. Someone's going to get that. Whoever goes to Kansas City, that's going to be a good landing spot. There's just going to be a number of them. I think Buffalo's probably going to go after a wide receiver. So there's a number of spots that we'll love. Whoever goes to, Baltimore, it's going to be like, ooh, like, yeah, I loved you before, but maybe not anymore. But yeah, I think, he's one of the ones I'm very excited about. Last player in this tier, Jonathan Mingo. I wouldn't say he's going to be a polarizing player. I'm interested to see who likes him, because he's got a number of different comps athletically, but 6'1", 226. So much bigger, much more built, much more thick than a lot of the receivers that we've talked about so far. And just a very unique player, because again, we've had so many of these like skinny wide receivers. He's the exact opposite. It's like a bowling ball. Just throw him a screen pass. That's really where the production was in college. Get him the ball quickly, screen pass, like drag route, slant. Just get him the ball, and he'll be really, really good after the catch. 4.4640, which at his size is a 96 percentile size adjusted speed score. He's got really good burst, as I said, really good after the catch, good catch radius, like very, very athletic. It's, will it translate, right? I have seen AJ Brown comps. My model comps him on the high end. So the best case scenario comp is Deebo Samuel. So that's kind of the mold that he could be. And when you start thinking about that, you're like, wow, this kid could be awesome. It is still fair to wonder. He makes C tier because there are problems, right? Like, his number one comp is Deebo. His bear comp is Laviska Shenault. And so if it's spitting out both of those, it's saying, hey, either of these outcomes is entirely possible. Best season in college, 861 receiving yards. He had one season over 27 receptions. He had 0 seasons over 5 touchdowns. So overall production, not fantastic. And when you think about like, oh, okay, well, don't a lot of receivers in college win with athleticism? Like, if this guy was highly athletic, get him the ball and he'll produce, why did he never have insane numbers, right? Like, and is he going to step into the NFL, a much better league, and all of a sudden be dominating? So there are definitely questions with him, but I just think like he's got a chance. He's got potential. Just don't go too much into him, because like, again, the production wasn't there, and then like he doesn't have very good success rates against man, against zone. Like, you do kind of have to scheme him the ball. But if he were to land on an offense that we know will do that very good sleeper potential. If he lands in an offense where we're like, oh, they're not going to scheme anyone open, we hate this coaching staff, not going to like them as much. D tier, tier of players who could break out, but, you know, I like the C tier, you know, again, Rashee Rice, Kayshon, however you say his last name, Jayden Reed, Jonathan Mingo. I think there are cases, very, very good cases for why they can break out this season and in their careers. This tier is, there are cases, but I don't like it as much. We'll start off with Cedric Tillman. I would say, I mean, obviously I ranked him first in this tier, has the best chance in this tier to break out. Got the size teams are looking for, 6'3", 213 pounds, 79th percentile size adjusted speed score. Really wish he hadn't gotten hurt last season. Could have seen him. I mean, he broke out in 2021. But yeah, and he got hurt last season, and that's why we saw Hyatt post the numbers that he did, because Tillman on that same offense. And that's the problem. On that same offense, I don't trust production out of that school. It's just not even similar to the NFL, and so I don't trust it. But, you know, I guess the bull case for him is he produced really, really well. He honestly like outproduced Hyatt when they were both healthy. And so if Hyatt's getting all this love and Tillman was better than him, I mean, he could have, if he didn't get hurt, had a much better season than Hyatt had. It's just, I don't really love the production. I'm definitely a different player. Like, he's not like only a deep threat like Hyatt is. One thing I'll say is it took him until he was 21 to have more than 100 receiving yards in a season. And again, breakout age is highly overrated. But when you look at it in certain aspects and you say, why did it take you until you were older than most people you were playing against to have more than 100 yards in a season on that offense, right? It's not a great sign. So I'm putting him here. I think he can produce, especially given his frame. I'm not in love with it. Next up, Trey Palmer, basically just discount Hyatt. 6 foot, 192, 4.33 40-yard dash. That is the fastest time in this class. The problem is that's a bad thing. If you look historically at the 2 fastest wide receivers in every class, it's going to take you a while to really find a success story. Like, you look at the fastest receiver, you don't draft them, right? They just don't have success in the NFL. And the ones who did produce, when you go back and look, they were like hyper athletes, right? They're guys like Jamar Chase. They're like DK Metcalf. Like, I don't remember if DK Metcalf was top 2. Like, I know he ran fast, but I think Jamar Chase, I'm pretty sure, was like top 2, top 3 in the class. It's like, when those really fast receivers produced, it was like, oh yeah, well, he's a monster athlete. That's not Trey Palmer. Trey Palmer isn't. If we look at Rashee Rice ran a much slower 40 at a bigger size, but his 10-yard split was faster, and that's my biggest problem with Palmer. If you're going to run like the fastest 40, but a ton of these wide receivers who were significantly slower than you overall were faster in the first 10 yards, it indicates no burst to me. He's got a 2nd percentile burst score. Like, he just doesn't get going super fast. And I don't know. I think he's going to have good games. I don't think he's ever going to be a receiver that we're like trusting in fantasy. Best ball only. Draft him as a sleeper deep in best ball. I don't see it for redraft league. Speaking of small receivers, though, got to talk about Nathaniel Dell here. Tank Dell, 5'8", 165 pounds. You know, if you want to move on to the next wide receiver, that's totally fine. There are only 2 success stories ever for wide receivers that small working out. Marquise Brown, Deshaun Jackson, both of them were taller. It's so unlikely. I don't care if you think he's a great wide receiver. It's just so unlikely that someone of that size can produce. He's got to get bigger. My model doesn't think he's going to be terrible, but it's spitting out a bull comp. So best case scenario comp of Cole Beasley. And it's like, if that's the best case scenario, like bear comp is Scotty Miller. Like, if that's kind of the mold of receiver, if I'm drafting late, even in these rookie drafts, like, I want someone who could hit. And I just don't see a world where Nathaniel Dell is hitting to where you're like, he's the cornerstone of your roster. Even he's someone you rotate in and out consistently and like are winning a championship with him on the roster as that piece. I don't see it. Not in love. I won't be drafting him. Last person in this tier, A.T. Perry. Another one it's got the size, 6'3", 195, 72nd percentile size adjusted speed score. Also has really good burst. He's going to be a player. There's not a lot of X receivers in this draft class, so that could push up his draft stock. If a team needs an X receiver, well, they're not looking to a lot of these players, and so Perry could fill that role, and because of that, could see the field early in the NFL. Unfortunately, he just like falls down as soon as he catches the ball. So there's not going to be any yak. He feels like he's going to be one of those outside wide receivers where you're like, for an NFL team, they'll like him more than we do in fantasy, consistently, like, maybe like a 3rd and 7, we're hitting him on the outside and we're like, nice, we got the conversion, but you got, 1.8 fantasy points and we don't see him again until they got to do that again. Maybe it leads to a number of touchdowns in a year, but it seems thin. When you have a lot of these breakouts, like, you want someone who's athletic. You want someone highly athletic because it's like, maybe you can just be better than everyone else in the field. Maybe if the route running develops, the hands develop, the football senses develop, you've got the physical tools. It's like, I feel like Perry's ceiling is capped because if he's just going to fall down every time he catches the ball, I mean, you better be DeAndre Hopkins, which we know he's not. And so, I don't know, not in love. But again, like I said, he's probably going to see the field relatively quickly in the NFL because he's going to play X receiver, and a lot of teams kind of need that. E tier is the same as the running back video. Not saying they can't break out. I really just don't have a good case for either of these guys. We've got Michael Wilson and we've got Xavier Hutchinson right here. And then we'll fill out the F tier with Bryce Ford Wheaton, Parker Washington, and Tyler Scott. So, again, I just don't have a good case. Maybe it's that I don't really know enough about these receivers. Each one of them should go around the 4th round. That's kind of where they're projected. And if you look at like projected ADP of everyone on this list, 4th round, like, they could go ahead of a lot of these receivers. They also do have the size. Michael Wilson, 6'1", 216. Xavier Hutchinson, 6'2", 203. It's just that, like, neither one of them is an incredible athlete. Hutchinson had, like, a solid production in college, but he didn't do anything special that, like, truly stands out. Yards per reception, pretty low. Wilson, I mean, we look, his best season ever, didn't even go over 700 receiving yards. Neither one of these guys scored more than 6 touchdowns. It's like, there's just nothing standing out. With a lot of these receivers, it's like, ooh, well, if Kayshon, again, Boutte, I don't know how to say it, if he goes to his first form when he was like, freshman, sophomore, maybe he can be awesome. If Mingo is used correctly, if Jayden Reed and Rashee Rice, like, they're just really, really good receivers, if they break out, it's like, I don't even know what the path is for Hutchinson and Michael Wilson. They just have to be a lot better than I think they are, than the model thinks they are. And maybe they are, and maybe they surprise us, but I just don't have a case for either one of them. And then F tier is basically the same as E tier, but I have even less of a case for either one of them. Parker Washington, I mean, he never even had like that good of a season in college, doesn't stand out athletically. 5th round projected draft capital in a bad class. I mean, none of that stands out. Tyler Scott, supposed to be a deep threat, but he ran a 4.4440 at the combine at 185 pounds. It's a 48th percentile speed score as a deep threat. Not in love with that. My model also hates him, and that's even feeding in a 3rd round grade. Like, he's projected to go in the 3rd round. If, like, my model doesn't like him at that draft capital, which is the draft capital, like, up here in like this B and C tier. So if Tyler Scott falls at all out of the 3rd round, my model absolutely hates him. And then Bryce Ford Wheaton, hey, a monster athlete, right? 6'4", 221 pounds, 4.3840. That's a 100th percentile size adjusted speed score. That's awesome. But he might not even go in the top 5 rounds again in a bad class. My model comps him to Martavis Bryant and Miles Boykin. Not fantastic. I suppose if he lands on a team where they ask him to be like, a number 3 wide receiver and he really develops, got a good quarterback, maybe it's just unlikely. Like, if he was really good with those measurables, he'd be going earlier in a bad draft class. So not in love with that. So really, this E and F tier are just not players in redraft. I'm really thinking I'm going to be like targeting as sleepers. Maybe that changes. Maybe we get a lot of buzz around them. I think earlier than I think in the draft, but not in love with them. This D tier again, Tillman, Trey Palmer, Nathaniel Dell, A.T. Perry could break out, but aren't really ones I'm going to be targeting right now. I used to like Perry more, but looking into it more, if he's not going to get that yak, he's not going to be a super athlete, not in love with it. I really think this C tier, Rice, Kayshon, Jayden Reed, Mingo, those are the sleepers. Marvin Mims, if he's being drafted among these guys, I'm in love with. I think he can really, really be good. Not in on Hyatt. Down's fine. This A tier is probably, I mean, to be honest, probably going to be overdrafted in fantasy. Jordan Addison, Flowers, and Quentin Johnston, and then Jackson Smith-Njigba clearly in a tier of his own. So if you haven't watched the running back video, watch that. I'll link in the description box if I remember. And then if you want like full breakdowns on these guys, you want to see full projections for everyone, see how they change after the draft, I'll be updating that like immediately when it happens. I might even update some of them as the draft is happening. You can see that on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. So that'll do it for this one. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting the like button? How about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? And thanks for watching.